So today we have one goal, and that is to teach a couple of these subclass keywords. If it wasn't important, I wouldn't bring it up. All right, but you gotta know this shit. I realize that I've been doing the things for the cookie cutter bills, and every single one of them, I'm like, well, you gotta read this, you gotta read this. So you guys need to know this shit. All right, so keywords for void. All right. First keyword. There's no real order. It's just how we're going with this. Okay. Suppression. I can spell. I swear. All right. Basically, suppression blinds the enemy. It stops them from using any of their abilities. So like sometimes the captains they teleport. They can't teleport. The hive shriekers they just close up. They won't fight you anymore. Um, Trying to think what else. We played a bunch of the Vault of Glass, right? The dudes with the purple shields that run at you that are kind of tall. They teleport and shit. Yeah, that stops them from teleporting. So any abilities. As a matter of fact, wizards from the Hive they can't do anything because all of their stuff is abilities. So it cuts off abilities. It also stuns overload champions. Stuns overload. That's important for later. I don't know why I put an extra in. I can spell, I swear. All right. Weaken. This is the most universal one. A 15% debuff. It just means that any damage that anybody does to a target that you weaken, deals 15% more damage. So you can look at it like whatever you hit has 15% less health until weaken wears off. And then there is volatile. I don't think I spelled that right, but you get it. Vollatile. I was close. All right. This one's kind of complicated, but you put a tiny bomb inside of them, and the tiny bomb explodes. So basically, you just make them explode. All right. They're explosive now. They are what they sound like. They're volatile. It's pretty simple. Okay. Um, four. We're going over void first because I think void has the most keywords. Uh, then there is void overshield. Um, this one's important because it gives you a, was it like a 40%? Let me be sure. 50. Oh, that's nice. 50% uh damage reduction. So as long as you have a void overshield, you have 50% damage reduction. If you don't know what damage reduction means, if you looked at it like this, you took 100 damage, now you only took 50 damage. That's what it means. So, really good. Invisibility. It does what it sounds like. There's no real reason to like go into it more than that. Um, it does exactly what you imagine it does, and you break it the first time you deal damage. Mm. Then there's Devour. This one's a bit complicated, but what it does is it heals you to full on enemy kill and gives 10 per. Why do I always want to do that? Gives 10% grenade energy per kill. Um, so yeah, you can completely ignore. And this is why the keywords are important. You can completely ignore your recovery stat. That's gonna be another thing we're gonna have to go over, like armor stats and stuff. But you can completely ignore your recovery stat if you're running void because every class has ways to get Devour, and Devour is just so strong. As long as you have enemies to kill, then you won't die. You just can't. As long as you can kill enemies faster than they can hurt you. Um, and then 7, which is the last thing, I promise, is Void Breach. Now, what Void Breaches do is they give class ability energy whenever you pick them up. Uh, whenever you pick them up, you say, I know. So let me separate these out, okay? These top 3, these are debuffs. They affect the enemy, right? These next 3, these are buffs. They affect you. And this one is, I had a name for this sprite. Now this is just a name I came up with, but I figured it'd be easy to remember it if I gave it a name. This is a sprite. All classes have a sprite, and it's just a pickup thing that you get through some of your fragments. All right. So that's void, and somehow I wanted to let you guys know uh where you can find some of these things, right? So we have uh suppressor grenades. They suppress, and it'll tell you, and it shows you overloads. Um, on the Night Stalker, it can come from the snare bomb. It also comes from your tether. You can also suppress with your tether, which is pretty cool. Um, Invisibility is just like a hunter thing. Basically, the only way you can get invisible not on hunter is with this fragment. Finishers grant invisibility. Um, and that easy access to devour. Picking up a void breach or a orb of power grants devour. And then you combine that with harvest. So starvation and harvest is like the good best combination to make sure you always have orbs of power, because harvest, defeating a weakened enemy, creates a void breach, and then uh, starvation, whenever you pick up that orb of power or the void breach, you get devour. So goes together, goes together. It's nice, 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 nice. All right, so that's void. Yeah, give me a second, and we're gonna set up the next one. We're back due to the power of my amazing editing skills. All right, so now we're gonna do solar. They have 2 debuffs, and it's basically the way that solar works here. They interact with each other. First, you have Scorch. I definitely didn't spell that right. Definitely didn't. There's no A. There's no A. I wish I could spell, dude. All right, Scorch. Now, the easiest way to look at this is that it's from 0 to 100, right? If you have 0 Scorch, they're not burning. If you have anything in between 0 and 100, they're burning, and the more Scorch they have, the longer it lasts. But once you hit 100 Scorch, then you have Ignition. And Ignition is just a big boom. So the gameplay loop is either to burn them all to death, or to burn them so much that they blow up. Ignitions deal with unstoppable champions. I'm about to do another one of these for unstoppables, but yeah. Alright. Then you have multiple buffs. Solar has a whole bunch of crap about healing. Alright. So you have Cure. Cure is just a chunk of health. Damn, that was rough. Yeah, Cure is just a chunk of health. So anything that gives you Cure gives you just a good little chunk of health. I think it's typically like 70 health, but don't worry about that. That'll be too confusing for y'all. Don't worry about it. Just know it gives you a chunk of health, alright? Restoration. is the stronger version of this, and it's just healing over time. Uh, and can't be ooh, interrupted. Close enough, right? Can't be interrupted. Um, can't both of these can go to times two. Cure just means it gives you a bigger chunk of health, and restoration just gives you more healing over time than you were before. So, just for reference, because these are not exact numbers, you just say you get like for regular restoration, it's like 20 health a second. That sounds terrible. 40 health a second, right? For restoration times two, it'll be more like 60 health a second, right? Um, I think the only class that can really take advantage of restoration times two is warlocks, or if warlocks give them to you. But yeah, that's kind of in the weeds, so don't worry about it too much. Radiant is another buff. Gives you a 50% damage buff. Always. And all weapons that don't have a champion mod or intrinsic champ stun will break anti-barrier champs. I feel like I'm speaking like I'm trying to speak to a Hispanic person, like they can't speak or something. Like I'm a fucking asshole Karen. But anyways, yeah. So Radiant gives you a 50% damage bump to all your weapons, and it also helps you deal with unstoppable or anti-barrier champs. I'm pretty sure that's not how you spell it, but you get what I'm saying, all right? And then the sprite is a fire sprite, literally. It's probably where I got the name from. And it gives grenade energy. Um, yeah, so those are the solar keywords, and that's how they work, right? Cool. Now it's gonna be time for what? Arc, our last light subclass. I know those editing skills are just badass, dude. Anyways, here is your arc keywords. You have amplify. Amplify is actually the easiest to activate because all you have to do is get rapid kills with arc anything, and then you will become amplified if you're on a arc subclass. What does being amplified do? Um, it gives you access to speed boost. And speed boost does what it sounds like, makes you run fast, makes you slide further. Um, yeah, that's about it. It just kind of makes you move quickly, right? And then the rest of the benefits from these buffs come from your fragments. If you notice, I'm not going over fragments right now. That would take a lot longer, so we'll work on that later. First things you got to learn is the keywords. All right, so debuffs. Blind. Blind does what it sounds like. Blinds the enemy. They don't shoot at you. They don't know what the fuck is going on. And it also stuns unstoppable champs. Um, and then you have Jolt. Jolt. Jolt is one of the best keywords in the game. Stuns overload champs. And basically what it does is it puts like electricity into them, and then if you deal enough damage, they will get shocked, and it will also spread to the people that are around them. Very, very good. Like I use Jolt when I'm not running Arc just because Jolt itself is really good. And then they have Ionic Traces. Ionic Traces are probably the best sprites as well because they just travel to you. Uh, yeah, they like just travel in a line towards you. Makes life way easier. Um, yeah, and as you can see, Arc doesn't have as much stuff, but I think that's kind of the point, because Arc is supposed to be about being fast and kind of just punching shit or getting close together and punch and stuff. Hence the blind, so they can't fight back, and the speed boost to get in there. Yeah, so makes sense. Yo, it's now time for stasis, the slow the fuck down class, you know? Alright, so stasis is a weird one. It was the first one they came out with this sort of system. I honestly think they kind of need to rework it because it's a lot easier to activate buffs and debuffs and so on and so forth on the other subclasses. But it's still strong. You just gotta know more about what's going on with it. Alright, so as far as buffs are concerned, the only things you really have is stasis crystals. And basically, they're just pillars that have three different levels. It's like small, medium, and large. And when you break them, they will shatter. Which I guess leads me down here. So we're going slightly out of order. Shatter, which stuns unstoppables. Um, and shatter just deals damage in the AOE. Think dragonfly or firefly or ignitions. That's just kind of how it works. And then the other buff, which I didn't actually put on the in the Discord. So if you're here, you got some exclusive shit. But is stasis resist. There's a fragment that allows you to resist or basically get damage reduction, DR, for standing near frozen targets or crystals. Stasis doesn't have a lot of buffs, which is really weird. But lore-wise, it makes sense because it's not actually ice; it's just the absence of energy. Yeah, long lore bits. I'll ignore that shit because most of y'all don't care. But um, yeah, you can get DR. You can also get like an overshield, but now that thing is so nerfed that I'm not even gonna mention it anymore. So, as you can see, we get shatter, but the way it normally works is you slow, and that stuns overloads, and it does what it sounds like. It slows everything down, including their reload speed, their movement, their firing patterns. Everything slows down for the opponent. And then there's freeze, which also does what it sounds like. The opponent is unable of doing anything, including moving. They're frozen. And then comes the shatter, and that happens after you deal damage to something that is frozen. Um, and it still applies the same way. Uh, as I was speaking of before, the shatter will deal damage in AoE, and stun those unstops. The sprite that you get is a shard. It's just a stasis shard, and the stasis shard gives melee energy. As you can see, each one of the sprites kind of do their own thing, which is cool. But once we get to fucking Strand, those those buffs that you get from the sprite is gonna be crazy. It's completely different. Yo, all right, and then for Strand, right? This is the newest subclass and probably the best in general for just general combat. Like for ad clear, I guess, more specifically, because of the hard CC. I know we just talked about stasis, and I was like they're frozen completely, but you can freeze or halt things in a bigger AOE than you can with stasis. Stasis is more like single target stop. This is like short term AOE stop. Anyways, keywords for Strand, your buffs. You have Woven Mail. Woven Mail is a monster. They actually had to nerf it recently. It used to be a 65% DR, and now I believe that it is a 55% DR. Doesn't matter. 55, that's a lot of damage resistance, okay? A lot of things don't fuck with you at that point. I actually missed one of these on Void, so I'll go over it at the end of this, just so we stay on the same page. But unraveling rounds uh, deals with anti-barriers. Fucking anti-barriers. Anti-barriers. It is specifically a fragment. I think it's threat of propagation. If you get a melee kill, then you get unraveling rounds for X amount of time. Unraveling rounds is just the debuff. Unraveling applied to all of your strand weapons when you deal damage, and it will stun anti-barriers. And what unraveling does is basically it quote unquote unravels the target by putting a whole bunch of like little nanites or whatever on them, little green nanites, and if you deal damage to them, then it starts flying around and dealing damage to it and people around it. It's like a mix between Jolt and Volatile, but it's not very strong. It's really just good for unraveling or for like boss damage because it's just free damage, similar to Jolt. All right, and then you have the previous star of the show, Suspend. This is your the AoE halt that I was talking about before. It's just BDSM. You pick the things up and they can't move. They just can't move. They're just picked up and bound and gagged, and you can just shoot them at your own leisure. Very, very strong. Doesn't last as long as it used to, which is why it's not as strong. But still, just a crowd wide stop that shit is still really good. Um, this is my favorite. I've been saying that this one's really good for a while, and they buffed it because they nerfed Suspend. Sever. This is a debuff to the enemy that does 40. I think it's 40% less outgoing damage for the target. So if there's a boss that's just doing a lot of damage, there's a one target that's just doing a shit ton of damage. Sever it. If you sever it, it's doing 40% less damage. And yes, put those together. You can get Woven Mail, which is 55% damage reduction, and Sever, which is 40% less damage. So you'll be taking 55% less of the 40% less damage they're dealing to. You're immortal. That's what it means. Okay, you're immortal. It's very good. Also forgot to mention, stuns unstoppables. Does not last very long on champions, but it will stun unstoppables, which means that it's only really good against unstoppables now and not the other champs. And then you have the Tangle. Now, all the rest of them you just kind of run to and pick up or whatever. But this one you actually pick up, and you need a fragment to get any buffs from it. A fragment or an aspect to get any buffs from it. But at base, all you do is you pick it up and you throw it and it blows shit up. Or it's just floating in the air. You can shoot it and it blows up and damages targets. It's just a little tiny nuke type deal, right? Which is still pretty cool. Oh yeah, I also needed to mention, uh, just so we don't get confused, Void. There is volatile rounds. It does the exact same thing that Unraveling rounds does, as it stuns anti-barriers. Um, you get it from the fragment on Void that lets you no, that when you kill a opponent with a grenade, it'll grant you volatile rounds. Honestly, I don't really know what I planned on showing at the end of this. So look at my super cool ship. It looks like the mystery machine. Yeah, that's it. If you made it to the end of the video, you got to see my super cool mystery machine ship. Later.